What is going on, you guys? This is DerekJ Speaks, and we are here to talk about AEW Forbidden Door 2025. Of course, their joint pay-per-view event with New Japan Pro Wrestling, as well as a few other promotions, this year held from the O2 Arena in London, England. And this was a very big show, a very crowded, stacked show that top to bottom, when it was over, I thought it was a very good show. But I can't really go beyond good. There was some good stuff on it, some good action, some good matches, a lot of very good action all throughout the entire show, some chaos in the main event with that lights out steel cage match, and of course a very depressing ending with the basically demise of Will Ospreay at the very end of the show. But that, all in all, kind of bundled together, presented a very decent AEW pay-per-view. Not one of their best, like not anywhere close to one of their all-time best pay-per-views, but nowhere near some of their worst. You had a lot of things on this show that happened, and not much of it will be overly consequential to future events that will unfold, but some things will. We have new tag team champions. We had a really great AEW World Championship match. And like I said, that cage match, you get to a point with a lot of these garbage stipulation matches in AEW where they start to blend together and you get stuff and spots in them that are seemingly done just to outdo what happened in the previous one. And we had some of that in that cage match, but for the most part, I still enjoyed it. And like I said, in the post-match, we had a huge beatdown on Will Ospreay at the hands of Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli, while the babyfaces, after already leaving the cage after being victorious, they ran back. They were trying to get into the cage. Of course, it was being held back by Wheeler Yuta and Marina Shafir and Gabe Kidd. Obviously, these guys were so tired and so exhausted that they were incapable of climbing into the cage. You could look over and see some of them, the ops, they came out. I could see Powerhouse Hobbs. He was trying to climb the cage. His big ass was not going to climb that cage. So I get it. They tried. It just didn't look like they tried hard enough. And for what was happening here with this segment, I feel like there should have been greater obstacle getting in their way of getting back into the cage, especially a cage that was much lower than usual and had a wide open top to it. There was no top. There was no ceiling. They easily could have climbed up and over. Maybe not everyone. Tanahashi with his knees, obviously going to be impossible for him, but why some of the other ones didn't get in there. They should have done a better job of focusing on that in order to really sell that there is no help for Ospreay, rather than what it looked like, which is just everybody clustered by the door and they couldn't get in. But either way, very heavy angle to close out the show. Very reminiscent of what happened to Bryan Danielson at the end of Wrestle Dream last year. That was the night that Jon Moxley first won back the title, and when it went into the backpack and the briefcase and was hidden away for several months, that was on that same night. They did an angle where they basically murdered Bryan Danielson and he got stretchered out, and it was this very somber note to end the pay-per-view on. And that was also in Danielson's hometown of Seattle, or, well, that was in Tacoma, but it was in his home state of Washington. In this case, in Ospreay's hometown of London, or at least his home country of England, he suffered a very similar fate here. And with all the talk of his neck injury and everything, whether it's a work or not, it's very much real. And this was a pretty good indicator of how real it is, in that they did such a huge, heavy angle to write him off of television for the foreseeable future. Now, will he have to go under the knife? Will he require surgery? And if he does, is it one of those fusion surgeries that requires people to be off the shelf or on the shelf, I should say, for several months, like a year and some change? Will it be something a little less invasive and he's just gone for a few months? Not sure. Only time will tell with that. But clearly, as evidenced by that ending, we are not going to be seeing Will Ospreay for a very long time. But at least when we do, he has a built-in reason to, or he has a ready-made program for him when he gets back to get revenge on Jon Moxley and the Death Riders. God forbid the Death Riders are still a thing by the time Ospreay comes back. But we'll dive a little bit more into that as we get to the ending of this pay-per-view. I'm going to kind of go through everything match by match. Not an extensive breakdown of everything, but just kind of general thoughts on the matches, what happened in them, the outcome, and what I think that sets up. First of all, not going to really dive too much into the pre-show. I'm sure there was some good stuff on there. You had a 6-person tag, you had an 8-man tag, you had an 8-woman tag. Just a lot of ways to get people onto the show in some way, shape, or form, but nothing of real value, in my opinion, to go over. So apologies if you were looking forward to me covering the big 8-person tag match that involved the Triangle of Madness and Megan Bayne and all them. But the proper show kicked off. Actually, even before that, the commentary team for majority of the show. We had a few people kind of in and out. Obviously, Don Callis was on commentary when some of his guys were in matches. We had Jim Ross at a few points. He was there on the call for the main event. But the main trio of guys were Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and Bryan Danielson. Danielson joined the commentary booth this past week on Dynamite, and he was on the call for majority of the show tonight, and he did, or tonight in England, but today during the day for me over here in the States. But I thought he did a great job. If you heard his commentary during the Cruiserweight Classic in WWE back in 2016, then you know how passionate he can get, and you know how great he is of telling the story of the match and, you know, calling the moves and everything. Very similar to Taz and other people like that. So he fit like a glove on commentary. Would not mind him being a more regular occurring person on the commentary team. But first match of the night was a tag team match as Adam Copeland and Christian Cage finally reunited. I say finally, even though their reunion came together fairly quickly, but they reunited here to take on Kip Sabian and what was supposed to be Nick Wayne, but Nick Wayne suffered a foot injury. He was pulled from this match and was replaced with Killswitch, the former Luchasaurus. So that was a very appropriate substitution for this match. And as far as match openers go, as far as matches go, this was a very fine tag team match, a very basic story told. As far as match openers and putting a match to open the show, to get the crowd hot, to get the show started off really strong, not the greatest option, but it is what it is. I thought the chemistry with Cope and Christian was fairly good. You know, they are very much older than what they were when they were originally teaming back in the day, so you weren't going to get a lot of that kind of chemistry between the two of them. It very much felt like two singles guys wrestling together as a team as opposed to a true tag team. But they did fine together. I thought the little story they were telling with Kip Sabian and Killswitch was interesting, in that Sabian was kind of trying to boss him around a little bit, and Killswitch was just tossing him away and wasn't listening to him. So that could be something to build upon in the future. And obviously the build here was towards getting Killswitch and Christian in the ring together, and we eventually did get it, but not a whole lot came from it. And in the end, we got a spot where Killswitch goozled Christian. He was on the apron. Christian was in the ring. He got him by the throat, ready to deliver a choke slam, when Copeland came out of nowhere and speared Killswitch through the ropes down to the floor. And then back in the ring, Kip Sabian Irish whipped into the ropes. Christian lifted him up, kind of flapjack style or 3D style, lifted him up, and then Copeland came right in with a spear in midair, and Christian pinned Kip Sabian to get the win for his team. And after the match, Cope and Christian, they shook hands, but no hug. Cope tried to hug him, but Christian was kind of avoiding it a little bit. They did hug a few weeks ago on television, but again, Christian had a very similar reaction to that, where he's a little standoffish. So they're not really together yet. So that's a very interesting direction to go into. And seeing what happened in the tag team title match later on in the show, very interested to see what the direction is for Cope and Christian as far as their eventual program and match with FTR and what that looks like. So, but we'll get more into that a little bit later. Up next was the TNT Championship match. Kyle Fletcher defending his championship against New Japan's own Hiromu Takahashi. If you gave the choice to me, I probably would have had this match be at the start, or this match probably should have started over the tag team match. But, you know, the fans were really into Copeland. They were singing Metalingus, and they loved themselves from Christian Cage. So that in and of itself was enough to get the crowd, you know, hot at the start of the show. This match, very fun. Nothing blow away about it. Nothing like crazy about it. Just a nice mid-card, undercard match where the finish really was never in any doubt. You know, despite a few cool near falls from Takahashi and his attempts at hitting the time bomb, in the end, it was Fletcher hitting him with a brainbuster to get the win and retaining the TNT Championship. So that was just kind of one and done. This is a kind of match you would expect at a Forbidden Door show. We didn't get a whole lot of them on this show, which begs the question as to why they continue to do the Forbidden Door gimmick. But then you have Tony Schiavone coming out later in the night talking about how they broke the attendance record for the O2 Arena, and they sold this show out based on this gimmick. I mean, it was really based on the AEW brand and some big names like Will Ospreay being promoted for the show in London, which is a huge market for them right now. So that kind of had more to do with it. I feel like this pay-per-view could have been called anything else, and they probably still would have sold out the O2 Arena, but it is what it is. Maybe rethink this gimmick for next year. But anyway, I was talking about how the finish wasn't in doubt in the TNT Championship match. The finish was even in less doubt for the TBS Championship match, a fatal four-way with Mercedes Moné defending against Alex Winza, Bozilla, and Persephone. Of course, Persephone representing, I believe, Stardom, and Bozilla representing CMLL. I think that's how it goes. Maybe it's the other way around. Either way, this match was this got some of the quietest crowd reactions that we saw all night. And there were some different points where the crowd was a little quiet for a lot of the action, and some of the matches just had to build up to some bigger spots to happen for the fans to really get into it. This is one of the matches where they were predominantly quiet outside of a few big power spots with Bozilla. This woman, she is tall, she looks jacked, she's only 21 years old, but in this match, she was one of the breakout stars in it. She had a lot of cool spots that really showcased her abilities and made her look like a very intimidating force. And of course, the other three women, they all played their roles, they played their part. But a big reason why I feel like the crowd really couldn't get into this match fully, and why even I couldn't really get into this match, is because the finish was never in doubt, and the challengers just, there was no story behind this match. Of course, that's the old tried and true criticism of AEW, even when it's not used correctly. In this particular case, it is used in that there was no story outside of the premise being that Mercedes' championship is in jeopardy because she's defending against 3 people and she doesn't have to be pinned to lose her championship. If you want to call that a story, cool. It's not a great one, but I guess it is one. But you have some of these people in this match who never appeared on TV. They haven't gotten any real promo time. There hasn't been any video packages for them. You haven't heard from them to know who they are, what their characters are, what their goals are, what their ambitions, like none of this stuff that can really hype up a match. And it's just this person's in there and this person's in there and this person's in there. And for a big championship match like the TBS championship typically is presented as in AEW, especially with Mercedes, you would think there'd be a little bit more effort put into it, but no such luck. And of course, surprise, surprise, Mercedes ended up getting the win here. She pinned Persephone to retain the championship. And at this point, she is very close to October. And in October, should she make it there, she will surpass Jade Cargill as the longest reigning TBS champion in the history of AEW. So I see no reason why they would have taken the title off of her when they're so close to breaking that record. And for the fact that none of the other 3 women really stood much of a chance of winning that title. Up next was the IWGP Heavyweight Championship match. Zack Sabre Jr. defending the championship against Nigel McGuinness. Just some great British technical wrestling here. Daniel Garcia came out in Nigel's corner. I thought that was leading to something. Maybe the swerve here is that it didn't lead to anything, and maybe something will come from it later down the line. And, you know, I guess the whole thing was, oh, we think this is going to go in a certain direction, and it ended up not going in that direction. So that was the big swerve here. But outside of that, the match itself, very good match. If you're not really into the technicality of certain wrestlers, Zack Sabre Jr., he is a very technical wrestler. You know, he locks on the submissions, he locks in different holds. He is very precise with his movements and the precision in which he executes his moves. If that's not your thing, if you are more into the high flying and the fast paced or the brawling and the bloody weapons and all that kind of stuff, you got that later on in the show, but I could understand you probably not liking this kind of match. But for me, I thought it was good. I didn't go into this thinking that this was going to be a blowaway match. I know what to expect with a Zack Sabre Jr. match. And Nigel McGuinness, I'm just happy to see the guy competing because this is someone whose career was cut short way before it should have been. And it looked like that was the end for him. And the fact that he is back in the ring and he gets to compete every now and then and he gets to write his own story and how he wants to go out is very cool to see. So I thought this was great. And again, another case where the finish really wasn't in doubt and you got the outcome you expected, which was Zack Sabre Jr. retaining the championship, the IWGP title. And I suspect that he won't hold that belt for much longer because, of course, Konosuke Takeshita won the G1 Climax this year, and he went on record as saying that he wanted to head into the January 4th Wrestle Kingdom show as champion. So maybe in these coming months, at some point between now and before January 4th, we could very well see Takeshita win that championship from Zack Sabre Jr. So that could be his fate. But for Nigel, I'm not sure. Maybe something with him and Daniel Garcia in the future, but for now, nothing really came up in this match. We had a backstage brawl involving Tekla and Queen Aminata that spilled out into the arena. And when Jamie Hayter and Sky Blue ran out to, gang up on Queen Aminata, we had the return of Jamie Hayter. So she came out, she provided an assist, she ran off the heels. Good to see her back. She got injured in that match with Mercedes Moné back at Double or Nothing. She ended up missing All In, and she was there the night that Tekla debuted, but the way they did that segment, it was just Jamie Hayter laid out, which looked kind of goofy at the time, but it turned out that I don't think Jamie Hayter was actually cleared to compete at that point, so she couldn't really have a visibly physical activity done to her in that case. So it looks like she's back. I'm sure we'll get a singles match with her and Tekla at some point. I'm sure she'll be wrapped up in this never-ending saga of 6-woman and 8-woman and 10-woman tag team matches on Collision for the foreseeable future, but still, good to see Jamie Hayter back. Up next was a triple threat for the AEW tag team titles. The Hurt Syndicate defending against FTR and Brody King and Bandito. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors, a lot of theories about the Hurt Syndicate over the past several weeks, with MVP and certain members of the Hurt Syndicate not really wanting to do business and turning down ideas of putting over certain teams, mainly a team like FTR. And the fact that this match turned into a triple threat after weeks of a tournament where the winner of that tournament would face the Hurt Syndicate on this show, the fact that that tournament ended in a draw between FTR and Brodito, leading to this triple threat match, adds a lot of fuel to that fire and speculation of those rumors. And the outcome of this match adds to that as well, because midway through the match, as the Hurt Syndicate are looking strong and kicking ass, they ended up getting taken out by some random mystery guys who were wearing masks. They got taken out into the aisleway, and then eventually they unveiled themselves as being the Gates of Agony and Ricochet. They took out the Hurt Syndicate, they brawled all the way to the back, and that was the last we heard from the Hurt Syndicate. And at that point, it was very clear these belts are changing hands, and no one has to beat either Bobby Lashley or Shelton Benjamin to do it. And that's exactly what happened, although it was a bit sloppy. So we had Bandito hitting a finishing move on Dax, and he goes for the cover, but then he doesn't get the pin all the way. He pins him, but then he kind of slips off, so then the referee has to hold up the count. Then Cash comes over and tries to break up the cover, but there's no cover to be had, so he just landed on nothing. And then Brody King stops him, and then Bandito goes to cover Dax again, and then gets the 1-2-3. So a little bit of a sloppy execution on the finish there, but still, Brodito, who have been one of the highlights of Dynamite over the past couple of weeks with a lot of their matches, they ended up walking out with the tag team titles. That was a pleasant shock to me. I thought this was FTR's to lose. I thought regardless of who they pin in this match, they're going to be the ones to walk out with the tag team titles. That's not what happened. I did think for a second, though, with how that finish came off, that maybe it might have been an accident, and maybe it was a botch, and maybe the pin was supposed to be broken up, but then the referee counted it as a shoot, and Brodito won the tag team titles. I'm not sure. I guess if in the coming weeks they put the titles on the line against FTR, and FTR immediately wins the belts from them, that might answer the question. But I am going to go on the belief that this was the plan. The finish just kind of got botched up a little bit, but still the end game was to give the tag team titles to Brody King and Bandito. If that's the case, I got no issue with that. You know, FTR and Cope and Christian, they are clearly on a collision course. I imagine that all-out show in Toronto is going to be built all around that tag team match, whether the titles are on the line or not. But I don't know. We'll see. And yeah, as for Lashley and Benjamin, them and the story of them refusing to do business and not eat the pin in this match, or whatever the case was with that, I don't know if it was true or not. I'm not sure what the mindset was in structuring the match like this. Doing another triple threat for them MVP was suspiciously absent from this show. Not sure. They didn't even really mention his name. So I don't know if that's going to have any say or indication on what they do in the future. Based on what happened, obviously a Hurt Syndicate, Gates of Agony, Ricochet feud is going to be upon us in the future. But till then, this is what we got. The Unified Championship was on the line next up as Kazuchika Okada defending the championship against Swerve Strickland, who came into this match with a knee injury. A knee injury that they only made public and part of the story just a few weeks ago, right out of nowhere. And then, of course, reports started coming out that Swerve Strickland has had a legitimate knee injury for several years. So, whatever he has been doing working through it, it hasn't hindered his performance much, but maybe now it's a little more serious than before. I'm not sure. But it didn't really stop them from having a good match. Things started off a little bit slow. You did have several points where Okada worked over the knee and did moves to target the knee. But I thought they still had a great match. They had really good chemistry back and forth. It was not an Okada New Japan match. You're just, unless he's in there with certain people, you're not going to see that. So I've just come to that realization. And there's a lot of people out there who have never really seen Okada from New Japan, who don't know that side of him, and they only see what they have seen in AEW. And from their vantage point, he's not all that impressive. And I can't really argue or refute that point. But even still, for what it was, I thought this was a very good match. Maybe was expecting a little bit more, but my expectations weren't super, super high for it. And I thought they had a fairly good match. In the end, there was a house call kick from Swerve that connected to Okada. And when Swerve backed up and went for another one, Okada ducked it. There was a little bit of a back and forth, and it resulted in Okada hitting a drop kick to Swerve and then a Rainmaker and got the win. So Okada retains the Unified Championship as he should. And then after the match, he went on the attack again on Swerve, targeting his injured leg, and trapped him in the steel steps. So Swerve was kind of enclosed into the steel steps. And out came Prince Nana with a pipe and chased off Okada with it. And as he goes to check on Swerve, in the background, we see this big dude in a suit come over and pull off Nana and start attacking him. And of course, this big dude is Wardlow. Wardlow has returned to AEW television. He beat down Prince Nana. A bunch of security geeks came in. They got beat down. One of them, maybe a few of them, got powerbombed. And meanwhile, Swerve is trapped and he is powerless to do anything to stop this. And then Wardlow leaves the ring and goes over into the entranceway and meets with Don Callis and gives him a big old hug. And we once again have a new member of the Don Callis family. Don Callis is trying to give Bobby Heenan a run for his money with his family. There just seems to be a new member every single week. And whenever one member goes down with an injury, you have a new member sprout up not long after. And it seems like, well, if you got certain heels on the show and they're not really doing anything, just pair them off with Don Callis. And that'll at least give them some kind of thing to do. They are either good for heat spots and getting beat down by bigger baby faces, or they can be thrown out there in random tag matches on Collision. Either way, that is the fate that awaits Wardlow. I have run out of times that I can count all the attempts that Tony Khan has made to try to fix Wardlow after he broke him several years ago. This man was once the most over act on the entire show, and it took very little effort for Tony Khan to kill all of Wardlow's momentum. And he has tried a few times over the past couple of years to reignite it and bring it back, and it has never worked. And of course, Wardlow has had his own issues, getting injured here and there, but that's neither here nor there. So we'll see if this works. He's once again in the position of being a bodyguard, a heavy, the muscle of a faction of multiple people, a spot that already was for Lance Archer. So now I don't even know what purpose Lance Archer serves in the group, but whatever. That's the fate of Wardlow. If this particular match wasn't enough to write off Swerve, maybe we'll get a Swerve Wardlow match at All Out, and maybe Wardlow can win that match, and that can be the way to write off Swerve if he also has to go away with his injury. But whatever, this was what it was. The match was good. The post-match stuff is what it is. We'll see if this new attempt to do better with Wardlow will actually work. Next matchup was for the AEW Women's World Championship as Toni Storm defended against the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion Athena, the forever champion, seemingly. And Athena, the winner of the Women's Casino Gauntlet at All In, she cashed in her contract here. She signed it and everything. This was the official cash-in of that. And these two women proceeded to have a very good match. Not really anything above that. Honestly, the match that Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné had last month at All In was better than this. The match that Athena and Mercedes Moné had a few months ago in the Owen Hart tournament was better than this. If you can see a common denominator there with those two matches. But if you put these two together, they had a very adequate match. This was not one of the bigger highlights of the show. I can't really call it a disappointment, maybe a little bit, because I did have higher expectations for this match, and it just kind of felt like a pretty decent match, a very good match. I wasn't, upset over it. Toni won and retained her championship. I wasn't upset over that. I saw a few people upset over it. I didn't feel that way. I figured Toni winning was the logical outcome. I probably wouldn't have gone with Athena this soon. She just won the contract. I probably would have held off on having her challenge Toni a little bit longer, because I could have seen Athena being someone to beat Toni for that championship. But now, after being handily defeated here, I don't really see her in that position. My fear is that she'll just be relegated back to Ring of Honor hell, which I really hope she won't be. She has consistently appeared on Dynamite and Collision for the past month. I hope that continues, even without her being in the World Championship picture, because she is too good to be hidden away behind a paywall for a show that barely anyone is watching. So we'll see what they do with her there. And as far as Toni Storm, I love Toni. I love the character. Her matches are really good. I have no issues with her being the world champion, but it's going to get to a point pretty soon. Maybe we're already at that point, but I don't feel it quite yet. But we might get there soon, where it's coming time to question, all right, what's next? I'm already questioning that. Like, who is next for Toni? She went through Mercedes. She went through Megan Bayne. She beat Athena here. She banished Mariah May to a completely different company. I don't know who else in the women's division, heel or babyface, right now is ready to step up and be a logical option to take that championship from her. She's going to have to lose it eventually. And I don't really know who in the division will be or is being built up to eventually take it from her. I don't see anyone. Tekla, maybe. Jamie Hayter's back. I would love to see Jamie Hayter and Toni Storm mix it up and put that belt back on Jamie. Jamie is too damn good not to be one of the top stars in the division. So if you can build her back up and put her in that spot, I wouldn't mind that at all. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The AEW World Championship, the Men's World Championship, was on the line. Hangman Page defending against MJF in a match where MJF did not have to put up his Casino Gauntlet contract, and Hangman could lose his title on a countout or disqualification. And that was a big story in this match, with MJF trying different things to piss off Hangman to cause him to get himself disqualified, or doing things to him on the outside to where he would be down and get counted out. And of course, none of that worked. These two had a really good match against each other on pay-per-view earlier this year at Revolution. This match was great. It wasn't as good as that one, but it was the best match on this show, in my opinion. I thought this was a great match. It was the best match of the show, and which is good because this is the World Championship match. On any other show, this would have been the show closing main event. I guess technically it was the main event of this show since the cage match was unsanctioned, but this I thought was good. I thought the story told here was really good. MJF and Hangman are two of the better storytellers in pro wrestling. They can really get you, to really get into the match and really follow along with the drama of it, and I thought they did a great job of that here. I thought MJF doing a lot of the things that he did in this match, especially, trying to antagonize Hangman, was very well done. And sometimes Hangman didn't take the bait. Other times he did. Other times he came close to it, like when MJF presented him with his Dynamite Diamond ring and teased him to hit him with it, even spat in his face. Of course, Hangman teased it, but he did not take the bait. But he did end up accidentally taking out the referee. He wiped him out, referee Bryce Remsburg. And then MJF ended up hitting Hangman with a heat seeker and went for the pin. Bryce crawled over, did the slow count, and counted 3. Although Hangman's foot was on the bottom rope. And they made a big point to focus on that because several weeks ago on Dynamite, there was a match with Mark Briscoe and MJF where Briscoe had his foot on the rope and the referee didn't see it. And that was still an official win for MJF. So after this happened, Bryce immediately collapsed again, so he didn't even call for the bell. So this brought out Mark Briscoe, who was trying to get to the ring. A bunch of officials and security were blocking him. He was knocking some of them down, but he never made it to the ring. He was just in the aisleway yelling over at MJF. And then as MJF turned back around to Hangman, he saw his foot was still on the bottom rope. He tried to take it off, but then the referee caught him, and he let the match continue. And from there, MJF tried different things to cheat. He tried to use different weapons. He did use different weapons. He used the Dynamite Diamond Ring. He used the Casino Gauntlet contract and blasted Hangman right in the face with it behind the referee's back, but it was only good for a 2 count. He tried to use the Dynamite Ring again, and this time the referee caught him, took it away from him, turned his back again, and Hangman got his hands on that contract, and he blasted MJF in the head with it, then hit him with a Deadeye, then a buckshot lariat, and got the win. So Hangman retained his championship. A bit of an overbooked, close to a mess, a little messy, I'll say, at the end there, but I still had a lot of fun with it. The crowd was hanging on to it. I think this match, other than the main event, this was probably one of the matches where the crowd was the most invested into everything, because you set up the whole DQs and countouts part of this match where a championship could change hands literally at any moment. So they were hanging on to all the near falls, a lot of the big stuff that MJF was doing at the end where he was cheating and he hit these big moves. You thought it was over and Hangman would kick out. So I thought it was great. And I thought even the finish was clever. And there are several outs here for MJF. MJF is a scumbag. He did cheat, but he did get a visual pinfall over Hangman. Hangman did cheat against MJF. So there are different. Mark Briscoe came out, provided a distraction. So there are different elements of this match where MJF, being the character that he is, can whine and complain and can probably work himself into another match in the future. Or he holds back and eventually he cashes in that contract successfully. I'm not sure where they're going to go with it. Because outside of MJF, I don't know who else you would put in there against Hangman Page right now. I definitely don't want to see him in there with Jon Moxley again, nor any other member of the Death Riders. So I don't know what other heels there are on the show to put him in there with outside of MJF again. So I don't know. That's up to Tony Khan to make the world champion a big deal and put him in there with someone who is a compelling character for Hangman to bounce off of and really buy into as being, someone to face. Maybe they just rematch these guys at All Out and that's where MJF does win the championship. I don't know. But on this show, this was pretty good. And then, of course, it's time for the main event, the unsanctioned lights out steel cage match. The Death Riders with Gabe Kidd and the Young Bucks taking on Will Ospreay, Darby Allin, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Kota Ibushi, and Kenny Omega. This was very similar to a lot of other matches of this similar kind. It was very similar to a lot of blood and guts matches we've seen over the years. Stadium Stampede matches, Anarchy in the Arena, even the Texas Death Match with Hangman and Moxley last month. This is very similar to a lot of those matches where you get the crazy weapons, you get some of the more insane spots, you get that one or two spots in the match where it's just like ew and disgusting and crazy. And that was the case in this match where you had at one point Darby Allin was duct taped to a chair and Moxley was driving a fork into his ear. So again, very disgusting, very disturbing, but you get spots like that in these kind of matches, and the fans reacted to it, which is, why they do it. The cage was not necessarily a blood and guts cage. It kind of felt a little bit like Hell in a Cell, just a little bit lowered. It did engulf the entire ringside area, so that was cool, I guess. And everyone at some point got a chance to shine and do something crazy. I did laugh at one point when Tanahashi was trying to climb a ladder and presumably hit a high fly flow onto somebody, and the other baby faces like Ibushi and Ospreay stopped him. So I thought that was a funny part of the match. The Young Bucks, one of the best parts of the entire match was before the match even started when they came out, and instead of their traditional theme music playing, it was Bop by Hanson, which I guess was one of their indie theme songs way back in the day. So continuing portraying them as, being down on their luck since they lost their EVP roles in the company. But we got other stuff in this match. Ospreay, of course, he was the big darling of the match. The whole thing was really built around him and Darby, who also got some craziness in this match. Claudio lifted Darby up at one point, gorilla pressed him over his head, and literally launched him out of the ring into the cage wall. At a later point, we see Moxley being helped out by Wheeler Yuta, who was not in the match. He was on the outside. He climbed up the cage. Moxley climbed up the cage, and Yuta helped Moxley escape out of the cage. And then Darby climbed up also. He knocked Yuta off. Yuta crashed onto a announce table. Didn't crash through it. He crashed onto it. So then Darby, he's on the top of the cage. He's trying to deliver some move on Moxley on the outside. Marina Shafir pulls Moxley off. So there was a big stack of tables. Darby was trying to do something. It was never going to work. Gabe Kidd, who was in this match, he climbs the cage. He's up there with Darby. He's trying to knock Darby off. Darby rakes his eyes, and he, along with Gabe Kidd, crash off the top of the cage down through this giant stack of tables and are both presumably dead. So there's that. Meanwhile, back in the ring, the other baby faces, they take out Claudio, they take out the Bucks, they take out Matt Jackson with a combo of a one-winged angel and a top rope, what was it, a hidden blade. So they took him out, and then they left it to Tanahashi to slowly climb the top of the turnbuckle and hit a high fly flow onto Matt Jackson and get the win. So the baby faces are victorious here. They stood tall. They gave Tanahashi the win, seeing as how this was his final match in the UK in his wrestling career. He is heading towards retirement next year at Wrestle Kingdom. So they gave him a big spotlight here. He got the winning fall in this match. And then the ring cleared for Will Ospreay, who was soaking in the cheers, was telling the fans goodbye because he might be going away for a long time. And that was the idea here. They even put up the copyright logo at the bottom of the screen, a la Black and Gold NXT days. And as Ospreay's leaving, he's about to leave the cage, he gets cut off by Claudio with an uppercut. And then Moxley gets back in the cage, and they lock the door. And they lock the babyfaces and the referees out. And they are just brutalizing Will Ospreay. Mox is hitting him with a bunch of Death Rider DDTs. I think he hit like 3 or 4 in a row. And then they wrap a chair around his neck, and Moxley stomps the chair and Pillmanizes Will Ospreay. And then he's just kind of laying there for a little bit. And then they slowly start to raise the cage. As soon as they do, the heels scurry out and they escape. Meanwhile, the babyfaces, the whole time, they were trying to get into the cage. They were trying to get in the door. You have Yuta there with a kendo stick fighting them off. You have, I think Gabe Kidd was over there. They were backing them away. Again, it looked very ridiculous that you really didn't see any of these babyfaces, any of these 5 or more, because I said the ops came out. All these babyfaces, barely any of them gave even an attempt to climb over the top of the cage. It looked ridiculous, but the idea here was that they were being held off. There were weapons involved. It was all that stuff, all that commotion. Meanwhile, Ospreay is laying dead here in the ring. They go off the air with everyone checking on Ospreay. There's a hush over the crowd. The commentators aren't saying anything. Well, they are, but they're saying like, oh man, it looks like this could have been the end of Ospreay's career. This could have ramifications on his well-being, his way of life, his livelihood, all that stuff, gassing it up. So I got the idea of this ending. I thought it was effective in that regard, but just the stuff with the baby faces kind of took me out of it. But isolated with what they did with Ospreay, I thought that was effective. If the man's going to have surgery of some kind, he needed to be written off TV. This is about as good a way to do it as any. So obviously this is not the end of Will Ospreay. That title of the video is just, clickbaity, only slightly. But I do think this is going to be the end of Ospreay for a while. I don't know when he'll be back. Ospreay's a weird dude. He could be gone for a year. He could be gone for 15 months. He could be gone for 5 months. He could be back next month for all I know. I don't know. This man is crazy. He probably shouldn't have even wrestled on this show. But he got some level of clearance to be able to be in there. And seeing back on what they did in this match, he did not do anything overly crazy. So there is that. But, Godspeed to him. AEW television will take a hit not having Will Ospreay around, potentially also not having Swerve Strickland around if he ends up going away. So those are 2 big blows to their babyface roster, but that will hopefully open the door for some other guys to step up and not necessarily take their place, but at least be looked at on a higher level than maybe what they currently are, So be interesting to see who steps up in that spot. And by the time Ospreay comes back, we might be getting ready for the All-In Wembley show next year in London. And he might be heading into the main event of that show. I don't know, but we'll see. Like I said, this show, top to bottom, a good show, not a great show. Not among the best AEW pay-per-views, but very, very far from the worst. But that is about it. I've gone on long enough talking about this show. What did you guys think of it? Leave some comments down below. And like this video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff if you like what you saw and heard. And next time I'm coming to you guys will probably be next week for WWE Clash in Paris. So they're also overseas for a midday show. And then after that, you got next month where All Out and WWE WrestlePalooza are going head to head. That should be a very interesting night. We'll see what I do. Will I review one show and then the other one another day? Will I watch both and try to review both of them? I don't know yet. We'll see. Till next time, take care.